Addiction is the great equalizer.
Fighting the opioid epidemic in East Tennessee.
Everybody I know has been touched by addiction.
What that battle looks like now, and the tools available right here helping people get clean.
You never have to use again.
The advice from experts on how to get help for yourself or your family.
It's important that we don't discount the importance and the influence that we have on our children's behavior.
And how you can help your kids recognize and fight addiction in our community early on.
280 people. That's how many people in Knox County alone have died this year due to a suspected overdose.
Across the state, 1,818 people died of an overdose in 2018. That's the most recent data we have.
The top county for deaths, Knox, followed by Davidson and Shelby.
More Tennesseans died of an overdose in 2018 than in car crashes.
There were 5.3 million opioid prescriptions in a state with 6.7 million people.
Well, tonight, we are tackling the issue head on, connecting you with resources to help. And we have a panel of experts on standby to answer your questions.
But first, a story of hope and recovery. Reporter Grace King introduces us to Griffin Bond.
I mean, I would have never imagined then that I'm going to school to help people. I'm working in treatment to help other people just start the process of recovery.
Griffin Bond's struggle with addiction began at age 12.
I just didn't fit in, like something that I never felt okay. And so I started acting out, becoming a class clown, you know, trying to gain acceptance.
He began smoking cigarettes, then marijuana, then prescription medications.
It progressed from over the years of just that becoming a habit occasionally or socially to become dependent.
Then he hit rock bottom.
I was 23, about to be 24, and I just realized there was nothing. I looked at the past 5 years of my life, I did nothing with it. I was like, I'm gonna be dead. I'm gonna be dead, and I just knew there had to be something different than this.
He went to a treatment center in Florida, got the support he needed, and began to turn his life around.
I came back from unemployed, no place to live, to a job and, you know, stable housing, and got to have some responsibility and pay, and it gave me purpose.
It took a recovery program for him to find happiness and eventually his wife.
He's the most amazing man that I've ever been with in my entire life.
Today, Griffin is a stepfather.
It's given us a family.
A student.
I'm in school to be a psychiatric nurse practitioner.
And a recovery advocate 6 years clean.
You never have to use again.
For Griffin and Brittany, recovery gave them a second chance.
There is hope, there is freedom.
One they want others to have too.
There's people waiting on you to get clean. There's people, you were so needed.
I'm Grace King, reporting.
One of the people helping fight the epidemic is Jim Wahlberg. He is the executive director of the Mark Wahlberg Foundation, which focuses on helping young people.
And Wahlberg has faced his own struggles with addiction. Here is his story.
My story of addiction started at a very, very young age. I had my first drink of alcohol, and not like sneaking a sip of dad's beer, but a real drink. I was about 8 years old. And then, you know, I think nothing really happened in terms of I didn't get drunk, I didn't get sick, but something happened to me inside in terms of I felt accepted. I felt liked. I made people laugh. I was with older kids. And so, you know, I was starved for attention. I'm one of 9 children. My parents were working all the time, 24 hours a day, just to feed us. And so I looked for that attention in all the wrong places. And my difficulties with drugs and alcohol really started to really manifest themselves by the time I was 10 years old. I was already, you know, I was using drugs, I was drinking, I was smoking cigarettes, you name it, you know, and I progressed, you know, and, you know, they talk about progression and they talk about gateway drugs. And that process happened for me. You know, I started with a beer, and I progressed to marijuana, and of course the whole time I was smoking cigarettes, and I progressed to anything that would make me feel different about the way I felt about myself, because the way I felt about myself was not good.
To shed more light about the recovery process and the help that's available, we gathered some of East Tennessee's opioid experts to break down the scope of the epidemic here.
And we begin with Jan McCoy, who lost her son to an overdose back in 2014. She and our other experts want parents to be aware and educated about addiction.
Well, Dane was your typical average kid. He played sports all his life. He had a 3.2 grade point average when he graduated from high school. He was active in church, was in the children's choir. He was a good kid. He did have a high anxiety level, and he somehow, some way got a prescription from a pain clinic in Blount County, and it wasn't long before he was addicted to pain pills.
What do you tell other families that they should look for as far as warning signs go, and then also what to do if indeed they find themselves in the same situation you found yourself in?
The warning signs are the distance. He was very quiet with me. We always had a very open relationship. He could come to me for anything. He started being very secretive. And then I noticed that things were missing from my home. He started stealing from us. And, you know, those were all flags. But of course, the sad part about addiction is the person that has it doesn't believe that they have anything wrong with them. It's a very complicated disease. I mean, you could not have a rational conversation with him. So it's difficult to get him the help that he needs. However, my advice to other parents is to, set up boundaries as far as when he steals, they steal from you, or they're disrespectful to you. You have to set up new boundaries and let them know that's not going to be tolerated, and then make sure that you follow through on those boundaries.
To be honest with you, as soon as a child can read, even if you're having to administer like over-the-counter medications, like say your child has a fever, let them help you, pull out the medicine, let them help you read the label, how much does it say you should take, let them help you measure it out. And just during the course of doing that, as a parent, you're sending a message that it's important to take things as directed, it's important to measure and to be accurate, and never take more than you're supposed to.
The earlier the better, because genetic predisposition occurs at birth if there's a family history. And addiction is not just to substances. At the Village, what we do is we teach about process addictions, and those are behavioral addictions that can come very early and can be in the family even if there's no substance use. So the earlier the better.
We know this education is happening in schools, but it's important from your perspective, as I understand, to have it going on both at school and at home. Why is that so important?
Well, again, parents have the greatest influence on their children. Even as teenagers, when they do the eye rolling and pretend like they don't really care what you have to say, they are listening. So it's important that we don't discount the importance and the influence that we have on our children's behavior. And so it's very important as parents that we arm ourselves with accurate information, because again, kids can fact check us these days. They can Google anything. And so you need to make sure that you understand the facts out there so that you can give accurate information to your kids, and you need to be that askable parent.
Families need to have these conversations. You need to have an open and frank dialogue with your kids. You need to listen to them. You need to have an understanding of what's going on in your own medicine cabinets, as well as what's going on in the school and in your community.
And we have our full interviews with all of those experts right now at WBIR.com. Just click in the As Seen on TV section of our app.
And we know this is a complicated topic, and we are here to help you find the answers. If you have a question for any of our experts, just text them to us. The number is 865-637-1010. We will answer them after this special in a Q&A style town hall on Facebook Live and on our YouTube page.
Still ahead tonight, how drugs work, the chemicals that create addiction, and the barriers to getting treatment in East Tennessee.
And as we go to break, the National Addiction Hotline is open 24/7 to provide help. And these national websites have dozens of resources. We'll be right back. More than 46,000 drug overdose deaths involving opioids were reported in the U.S. in 2018. Now, what does that mean for Tennessee? More than 1,800 drug overdose deaths. And in Knox County, the number of suspected OD deaths so far this year has already surpassed the total number of deaths in 2019. So if opioids continue to kill thousands every year, why do people still fall into addiction?
Drug experts say it all has to do with a chemical called dopamine. And here's how the addicted brain works. When you do something you enjoy, like riding a bike, the brain releases endorphins, those attached to opioid receptors, releasing normal levels of dopamine, giving you a natural euphoria. The effects are different with drugs. When opioids attach to endorphin receptors, the brain releases an excess of dopamine, overstimulating the brain and causing a high.
And when the high ends, the addiction kicks in. Drug experts say when you take opioids repeatedly over time, the body slows its production of endorphins and builds tolerance. Now, this means in order to reach the same flood of good feelings, the body needs to take in higher doses of opioids.
As far as treatment goes, what would you tell people about its availability for people who are trying to conquer an addiction in this community?
Well, I would just tell people to continue to try to seek out some type of treatment because it's very difficult sometimes in our area because the lack of resources. I actually had two gentlemen I had to send out of town just last week, but I would just encourage families and families of loved ones who struggle with addiction to just seek out some type of help from someone that is knowledgeable of the treatment process or the counseling process, or just find someone in the field that knows information about how to get someone into treatment. I know that those who have insurance will more than likely get into treatment faster than those who don't have insurance. And that's one of the biggest gaps right now is trying to navigate the treatment centers with the person who needs to be treated. And that's a really difficult process, especially here in our area, because there's limited resources for those who need treatment that do not have the funds to get into treatment. And that's what we run up against on a daily basis.
That speaks to the socioeconomic side. What about the race side? Is it harder to get treatment if you're Black or Hispanic?
I can just speak for being a Black man. In our culture, it's not really suggested that we go to treatment. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have, because addiction affects everyone. And I just hope that now that we see is that addiction is crossing all lines: color, race, ethnicity, gender, and we got to be more proactive with saying, hey, you need to go get help.
Another part of the overdose epidemic, the loss and heartbreak. Up next, why one mother who lost a son to addiction says people should not be ashamed to ask for help. And as we go to break, this is a statewide hotline you can call anytime for assistance.
Addiction has certainly taken a toll on East Tennessee during the past decade.
But those left behind are fighting to make a difference. Reporter Grace King introduces us to one Blount County mother who isn't afraid to start that conversation.
I am from embraces, from that of a mother's arm, the lick of a dog, the cold taste of a snowflake. From impacts of pain, shame, pleasure, and love beyond measure.
For Mimi Bristow, this poem is a reminder of her son.
At high school. Is that amazing?
Joseph Bristow was a writer, an athlete, and a kid who lit up the room.
He'd make everybody smile. He always liked to laugh. He was loud. He had a lot of promise.
But like his father, Joseph struggled with addiction.
I watched him for 12 years struggle being addicted. We went through the gamut with him.
He tried program after program.
He went to the ranch. He did detox at Blount Memorial. He went to Cornerstone. He did True Purpose.
And finally got clean.
He was going back to school. He was talking about getting a law degree.
But after 14 months sober, Joseph relapsed.
I don't know what sparked him to want to use again.
On December 3rd, 2019, he died from an overdose.
In his obituary, I put that he lost his battle with drug addiction. Well, a bunch of my friends said, oh, you know, that's brave that you did that. I said, it's not brave, it's the truth. And people should not be ashamed.
That phrase was Mimi's way of raising awareness.
Everybody I know has been touched by addiction.
And her way of letting others know there is help.
It shouldn't be a secret. It shouldn't be something you hide. So that's the best advice I can give any parent. Get some help. Go and seek out help wherever that is.
I'm Grace King, reporting.
And if you need help, there are countless resources right here in East Tennessee. They include the Metro Drug Coalition and the McNabb Center. Their websites are listed on the screen, and you can find more in the As Seen on TV section of the 10 News app.
Addiction is something, unfortunately, many parents have to face.
A recovery therapist with Village Behavioral Health breaks down what you should know as a parent to protect your child.
I have a handful of questions I'd like to ask you from our viewers, and let's begin with this one. What should I do if I suspect my child is taking drugs?
Make sure that you're having a conversation even before you have that situation occur. You want to talk about what's going to happen if that situation does occur and have the rules, kind of clear, concise rules of what's going to happen. The biggest thing is not to overreact, because you don't want to shut down the lines of communication with your teen. You don't want to teach them not to come to you. It's a really awesome thing to have your teen come to you and tell you that something's happening. But if you suspect it, the best thing to do is to gain evidence first before you address them. Tell them things like the things that you've seen that are different, and don't overreact. But also don't ignore your gut instincts either. You want to make sure if you know your child, if their priorities are changing, if they're acting different, you definitely want to interrupt anything that could be happening.
You touched on this a little bit, but what if a parent finds drugs in their child's room? What's the next step?
Just talk to your child about the consequences of drug use and also how it changes people's priorities. And just let them know that there are consequences and there are wheels that are set into motion once they start using or once the drugs are found. And it's not the parent doing it to them, it's them doing it to themselves.
A lot of parents are monitoring their children's social media. What if they start to see things there that concern them?
Well, the big thing is to keep the lines of communication open, and then also have them understand about how privacy is awarded to them. It's not a given. And there are ways, definitely keep yourself informed regarding your child, because it is your business, especially when the fines are going to be paid by you, and especially when, you know, you could be legally held responsible for something that they do. So keep the lines open, and then also have them understand that if they're lying about it on top of that, that is an indication of a bigger problem or an addiction forming. Because drug use doesn't automatically mean addiction, but it definitely can. It is the first progression of addiction. It's the first stage.
Now, we know you still have questions about the OD epidemic, so send them to us to 865-637-1010, and we will do our best to get you answers.
We are answering a lot of those questions in a couple of minutes on the WBIR Channel 10 Facebook page. Our panel of experts will share their experiences and answer your questions. We appreciate you watching tonight. 10 News at 6 is next.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this virtual town hall to talk about opioid awareness. My name is John North, and I'm a journalist at WBIR, and I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Grace King. Together, we've reported for years about the opioid awareness problem, about the need to create greater awareness, and about the problem that the crisis, essentially, that continues to occur in our community across the country. We're going to be hearing from several panelists tonight. They all know and have been dealing with this problem, and they have a lot to share with you. And I think Grace will be introducing them right now.
Thanks, John. So we have with us Jim Wahlberg, the executive director of the Mark Wahlberg Youth Foundation and in recovery himself. We have Todd Scott, special agent in charge of the DEA Louisville division. We have Karen Pershing, executive director of the Metro Drug Coalition here in East Tennessee, and Dr. Kip Wagner, the medical director for Cornerstone of Recovery and regional performance medical director for Team Health. Thank you all so much for being with us here tonight. We know how important this is to those of us in the community.
Thanks very much to you all, and to our audience as you all watch. Please, if you have questions, we have the availability to answer your questions. We want to hear from you, and these folks are happy to respond to your questions. You probably have a lot of things that you'd like answered, and you may have experiences you'd like to share. So please send those in. You could do that by Facebook. You could text us at 637-1010. So let me start off the conversation with Jim Wahlberg. Mr. Wahlberg, you're an activist. You lead the Wahlberg Foundation. You're an author. You've written about this. You've been preaching essentially for years about this. I'd like to know your thoughts on why you're so passionate about it and how you think we're doing these days.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. And also thank you for having this very important conversation, right? Because the more we have this conversation, the more we chip away at the stigma. For me, really a more important question is, why isn't everybody doing more? Why isn't everybody on the front lines, right? We are losing Americans, human beings, people, right, at a rate of somewhere around 75,000 a year to overdoses, right? That's alarming. Many of those people are very young people in their teens, in early 20s. So, you know, I'm a person in long-term recovery. I come to this space by way of, you know, I'm enjoying my recovery, living a great life, and this epidemic starts to really take hold of our country. And I start to hear from people that have lost their children. And I felt obligated to be part of a conversation. And what that meant for me is I made a film. And it's the film that we show usually at these opioid youth summits when we're in person. And I made a film and thought I would contribute that film and move on. And ultimately what happened is I met hundreds and hundreds of people who have lost their children. And I kept getting requests, come have a conversation, help us facilitate a conversation, show us your movie, talk to us, share your experience, strength, and hope with us. And so really out of guilt, almost 10 years later, I'm still here, right? Because I couldn't walk away, right? I felt like, how dare I, right? Every day, hundreds of parents that have lost their children wake up in the morning and they go out and fight for my children. So how dare I not go out and fight for others' children, right? And so it's as simple as that for me, right? And I had no idea when I started this process that I'd still be doing this, that I would have traveled around the country for the last 10 years, that we would have shown the movie if only to 250,000 people. I had no idea, right? But I'm being used in a way that I can be effective, that I can, you know, when you we have some very smart people on this panel. And so I don't want to just, you know, say anything. When I speak to a person that's struggling with substance use disorder, when I share my story with them, they understand that I know the struggle firsthand, right? As opposed to having learned it in a book. And there's a connection there that other people don't really have. And there's a trust and a bond that is developed, right? That they know I'm not going to point them in the wrong direction, that I see the light at the end of the tunnel and I can point them in that direction by just showing them what I did, right? And I'm no genius. I just did what people in front of me did.
Thank you. And because of the pandemic, we've seen an increase in overdoses, particularly here in Knox County. But Special Agent, for you, what effect has COVID-19 really had on your operations across the region and here in East Tennessee?
Well, again, I also want to echo what Jim said and thank you for having me on here. This is, I'm wanted to be involved tonight as a special agent, talking about the work that we're doing, clearly
Special Agent, I think you're muted.
Yep, there we go. For us, it's kind of a multi-pronged approach to the drug opioid epidemic. It includes obviously the law enforcement component, kind of a diversion component, and then this component, which is community outreach. And quite frankly, again, although I'm here to talk about our work as agents, I'm also here as a parent. So this problem is not just professional for me, and clearly the opioid overdose epidemic is a huge legal enforcement problem for us. We've seen the numbers grow dramatically, but it's also a personal situation because I have kids, I have family, and I have seen this problem affect the lives of those around me as well. So this is kind of a unique platform for an agent to engage in. You know, I've been doing dope work for many, many years. I've done undercover, done a lot of cases, been on the streets making these sort of drug cases. And very rarely does, or at least for a long time, this side of it, the community outreach piece, the demand reduction piece, the education piece, we left to other people. But I'd say in the last decade, DEA has realized, I think as many people have, that, you know, it's kind of a cliche to say it now, but you can't quite arrest your way out of this problem. And so we have kind of created through Operation 360 and some other stuff, this holistic approach. Not only do we bring all of our law enforcement and the regular, you know, crime fighting tactics to bear, but we also bring this community outreach part to bear as well. So we come in, work in communities, we clear some time and space, and then educate families as well with what we're seeing in Tennessee and then across the nation as well.
Thank you, Agent. And as we converse, we're going to mention some efforts that you guys are involved in that are coming up this month. October is an extremely important month for that, and we want to talk about that. But let's shift now to talking with Karen Pershing of the Metro Drug Coalition. Karen, for a while there before this virus hit, it seemed like you were on our air just about every week trying to stress what was going on in our community and how we could combat it. And I want to sort of follow up on what Agent Scott said in terms of this is an affliction that spares nobody. It hits children, it hits middle-aged people, it hits the elderly. What are we making any progress in our community, do you think?
Well, I think there's been quite a bit of progress made in terms of the opioid issue itself. We've definitely seen a decrease in prescribing. So we've done a lot of good work educating medical providers and prescribers and looking at alternatives to pain management instead of just automatically going to a narcotic. We've also made headways in our neonatal abstinence syndrome in a reduction in babies being born exposed to opioids. And so anytime we can prevent a case of NAS, we're saving a baby a lot of pain and heartache, and a mother and a family, but we're also saving dollars, healthcare dollars too, the more we have babies born that are healthy, normal birth weight, and not suffering from drug withdrawal. So again, I think we're seeing some bright spots. Unfortunately, overdose deaths are not what we had hoped they would be at this point. What's really disheartening is in 2019, we actually saw a 10% decrease finally in Knox County in overdose deaths. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we have seen those numbers increase again. And so it can be very discouraging sometimes when you're working on this to not continue to get discouraged, but it's people like Mr. Wahlberg and others who are in long-term recovery that keep you pushing forward and knowing that if you give people the right tools, they can get on the other side of it and they can find a life in recovery where they can thrive and give back to others.
Thank you. And Dr. Wingner, this one's for you. What have you seen kind of change during the pandemic in terms of overdoses and addiction in East Tennessee?
Well, again, thank you for including me in this panel. And I mean, certainly COVID has been a real challenge for us, both medically, but also on the addiction side. And I kind of have my feet in both canoes. I'm a practicing emergency physician, and I also am the medical director at Cornerstone. So when I work my shifts in the emergency department, has kind of been alluded to by a number of the panelists, we see more overdoses, and the access to treatment and to care has been more challenging. And so, addiction certainly thrives in isolation. And I don't have to tell anybody that, isolation has been a big part of what we're seeing right now with COVID-19. So it's been a challenge to get treatment, and it's been a challenge to access treatment. That and the fact that a lot of folks are under a great deal of stress, whether it's financial, social, et cetera. It's been rough. And a lot of folks that have substance use disorders turn to their substance.
Doctor, thank you. We're starting to get some of your questions in, and we appreciate that. And following on the doctor's thread, Jim Wahlberg, let me pick it up with you. This is an extraordinary time that we are now living in, and it's so isolating. I mean, I'm sitting here talking to you guys in my house. I've been working from my house for, 7 months now. I'm happy to see your faces, but I wish I could sit with you in a room. We can't do it. But Jim, how do people make connections struggling with this addiction? How do they make connections with human beings so that they feel whole in some regard?
I believe you're still muted.
I think you're still muted.
Okay. How about now? Okay, so here's the thing. We have to use the tools at our disposal right now. This is as good as it's going to get for us, right? Unless we can do some real sort of distance type outdoor meetings, right? But I'm going to tell you right now that addiction, substance use disorder, the opioid epidemic itself, in my humble opinion, has killed far more people and will continue to kill far more people than COVID will, right? So I'm not encouraging people to break the law, but I'm encouraging people to do whatever it is that they have to do to stay clean, right? See, the thing is that recovery is connection, it's community, it's a real bond, if you will, a brotherhood or a sisterhood, right? And addiction is the exact opposite. It's isolation, it's depression, it's separation, it's loneliness, right? And we're being encouraged. In fact, we're being told to isolate and to stay away from people and to be alone. People have suffered, and we don't have the market cornered on suffering. People that suffer from substance use disorder, we don't have the market cornered, right? But the subject is this, right? And so many people are suffering as it relates to COVID across the board. But this particular population, we need to go as far above and beyond as we can to save ourselves, right? So we need to be calling people. We need to be a big part of recovery is being of service, right? So if you know someone with 5 seconds less time than you, call them up and be of service to them. Or if they have 100 years, call them up and just listen to them. Let them speak. Get out of your own way. And if you love somebody in recovery or somebody that struggles with substance use disorder, why don't you reach out to them and tell them how important their recovery is to you and how much you respect the fact that they are clean and sober and how much you respect the fact that they have done all this hard work to get their life back, right? And how much you love and appreciate them, right? That is what we need to be loving each other. We need to take care of each other more than ever. We need to lift each other up. And so whatever tools we have at our disposal, with my guys, I don't talk to them on the phone anymore. I do this at the very least. I want to see their face. I want to see their eyes, and I want to see that they're okay. And so we need to do that. We need to connect with people in whatever way we can.
For sure. Thank you so much. Our next question, I think I'm going to go to you, Agent Scott. It's kind of 2 parts from 2 different viewers we have. What specific drug is causing the most overdoses in East Tennessee? And are you seeing more prescriptions or street drugs causing those?
Well, clearly, one of the troubling things that we're seeing a lot now, particularly in younger kids, is these fake pills. So people think they're taking Adderall or something like that on the street, and it's been adulterated with fentanyl. So whereas I would have traditionally said maybe a year ago that oxy, street oxy and stuff like that would have been one of the more troubling things that we're seeing, really it's these fake pills. So kids are playing, in effect, Russian roulette when they're going out and buying these sorts of pills, and they're heavily adulterated with fentanyl, and we know how dangerous that is and continues to be. So, and honestly, one of the other things that we're seeing is that a lot of these pills are coming out of homes, right? When you're talking about OxyContin and things like that, it's the initial arc of use is out of the home. It's out of medicine cabinets and things like that from the home and family environment, which is why I think we were kind of referenced this earlier. This month is our Operation Take Back, where on the 24th of this month, we work with state and local counterparts to help get those unused, expired, and otherwise kind of dangerous prescription meds out of people's cabinets, out of their homes, and safely disposed. Because oftentimes that's where at least our younger kids are starting.
Karen, so staying on that thread, we have a question from a parent, and I'll just read it to you because I think it's good and it's something that you've dealt with, and it's relevant to our audience. I believe my child is smoking marijuana. How worried should I be? I know a lot of teens experiment with marijuana and alcohol. How do I know when it's a problem?
Any use of any substance, whether it's legal or illegal substance, to an immature brain should be concerning to any parent. So whether that be a vape product, which are very popular right now, there's nicotine in those, alcohol or marijuana, the THC in marijuana. When you're talking about an adolescent or pre-adolescent developing brain, that brain and that chemical exposure to a brain at a young age, when that brain is not fully developed, is extremely concerning because they can get addicted a whole lot quicker than an adult who has a fully functioning brain. So you need to take any use seriously, not overreact, but have a conversation with your child, find out more about the context of what's going on with their peer group, why they're using. Again, a lot of times adolescents use initially because they're having mental health issues. They're suffering from depression, anxiety, things along those lines. And so it's important as a parent that we have conversations and we start recognizing maybe when our child might be struggling with a mental health issue, and then seek some professional guidance. If you do feel like they may be struggling, and get an assessment done. Again, you're not a therapist as a parent, but you know your child better than anybody else. And so you're going to recognize changes and don't just say, oh, it's hormones, or, this is just natural. Just to be on the safe side, get them checked out, and, pay attention to what's going on in their environment, because you will learn a lot just by noticing subtle changes initially with young people.
And just underscoring that, Grace is going to take the next question, but there should be no shame or stigma here. And Jim said that earlier. There is no stigma here. If this is happening in your family, deal with it. It's better to deal with it.
Definitely. Dr. Wenger, we're going to go back to you. This is another question from someone watching right now. Is addiction genetic?
Can I go back one step and just kind of add on to what Karen had mentioned? Because I think
go for it.
Because Karen and I are maybe not surprisingly on the same page with this. If your frame of reference for marijuana is a joint you smoked in college 15 years ago, I would strongly encourage you to do some reading. And I can see Jim kind of clapping back there, because the THC in the joint that I smoked in college, if I do, this may end my employment right here, but in the THC that I smoked in the joint that I smoked in college had a concentration of less than 4%. What's out there now is well over 20%. In fact, you can get concentrates as high as 100%. So we're seeing often kids coming into the emergency department and they're floridly psychotic. So it's a completely different marijuana of today. The THC of today is not your marijuana as a parent. That was what I would say. And your actual original question was regarding genetics. And certainly, you know, addiction is a multifactorial illness, a chronic brain relapsing illness. And certainly genetics play some role in that. Obviously, we can't get past our genetics. But we know that as prescribers of opiates at times, we need to look at a person's susceptibilities. And if there's a family history of drug use, obviously that should be a red flag. Karen referenced also mental health illnesses. As many as a half of the patients that we see in the substance use treatment side have some underlying mental health issue, some co-occurring illness, which is the term used now to describe that. So that's pretty common. So we really have to be careful. And I think we've been somewhat more judicious as far as prescribing, although unfortunately, I will say the state of Tennessee is in the top 3 of opiate prescribing per capita. Once again, and I don't mean to make fun of this, but we're behind Alabama once again. Sorry, SEC reference.
Jim, do you want to jump in here? It looked like you wanted to say something. Feel free.
Yeah, I did want to say something. I wanted to talk about this marijuana. So here's the thing. Marijuana now is chemically and genetically altered, right? With one goal in mind, and that is to create repeat customers, right? It's extremely addictive now, right? As opposed to maybe like the good doctor said, right? Maybe 15, 20, 30 years ago, it was growing in the ground in somebody's backyard. I don't know. It was a gateway drug back then for me too, right? But what I'm talking about is the effect that this chemically and genetically altered stuff has on the minds of young people. And the doctor talked about that, and we need to be focused on that, right? Because it's like you can't believe the marijuana companies. It's like believing the tobacco company, right? That you're not going to get cancer, right? They told us that for years and years and years to make money, and that's a big problem. We need to be focused on that. And so I would encourage anybody that has found that their youngster is smoking marijuana is to have a serious conversation with them about that part of it. And as well, I would actually absolutely talk to a professional.
And do it straight on, right? Don't mess around. Straight
on. I mean, listen, kids, they don't come with a handbook, you know? We're all doing the best we can, right? And I've dealt with this in my own home with one of my own children. And so it's difficult, it's tough stuff. But there's a lot tougher stuff that can be happening in your life as a result of not addressing substance use disorder issues at home.
Jim, stay with us. Some of the folks that are watching us are asking us if you could talk, just let us know some of the movies that you have made about this that may be available that they can see and the ways they can see them.
Sure. Okay, so my newest film, which is online right now, is called What About the Kids? And that film looks at it from a child's perspective. That child loses their mom and is now being raised by their grandparent, which is a very common occurrence now in our country. And you can go to whataboutthekidsfilm.com to see that movie right now. The film that we show at our Opioid Youth Summits is not yet on Amazon, but we're putting it on Amazon in the next month so that it'll be available to everybody. But we have a couple of other films up there. One is I Played the Giants on a Monday Night, and it addresses an athlete who ends up on opioids. And so the films are available. They're out there. And we also, we are still, as soon as the government says, go, I just bought an RV. I'm hitting the road again. And because I want to be out there. I want to be having this conversation with people, showing them the film and having this conversation, because I think the two go together. But I encourage people to see What About the Kids. It's we've had 165,000 views in the last month.
Those conversations are really important. And Special Agent, I want to go to you next. You said there's a couple big events coming up this month that, are starting those conversations.
Yeah, and again, I'll reemphasize our Take Back program. It's something the DA has been involved with for many, many years, and it's been very successful at getting expired and unused medications out of people's homes. Again, which is that sort of gateway or pathway that we're seeing a lot of our young adults start their drug abuse problems with. The other thing that we do every October 23rd through the 31st, is our Red Ribbon Week. And it started as a way to kind of memorialize the life of Kiki Camarena, an agent who was killed doing this line of work. But it's become kind of a uniform way for communities nationwide to take a stand against drugs and drug use. During that week, agents go out, we talk in schools, we wear the red ribbons, we participate in a lot of community events, and it's a way for kids to stand up with their red ribbons and say, we're going to take a stand against drugs and drug use, and we're going to take a stand in our own homes and communities.
Thank you. We've got a few minutes left, and of course, we have a lot of territory we want to cover, may not be able to get to all of it, but Karen, I just wanted to ask you if I could, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot. You live with this, you deal with this, you strive to offset it every day of your life. If we could grant you one big wish about this crisis, what would it be?
Wow. That's a big question.
It is.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, if I had to wave a magic wand and I tell everyone if I could sprinkle some pixie dust, I would just make addiction go away. I mean, wouldn't we all just like to see this totally go away? So that's just my grandiose response to that. But in the meantime, until we can get to that point, we've got to figure out a way, again, to decrease stigma, increase prevention efforts so that there are fewer people in the pipeline that end up with a disorder. And then we also have to engage in getting more people into treatment and making sure there's adequate access, and not telling people, especially those without insurance, you've got to wait 2 or 3 or 4 months to get in, because we have a waiting list that's 3 or 4 months long. It's totally unacceptable. And we don't accept it for any other illness or disease. Why is that okay for addiction? It shouldn't be. And so again, just overcoming some of those barriers, having recovery support services available, and having a thriving recovery community in every community in the U.S. where people gather, they support each other, and there's a connection. Again, Jim mentioned this and how important that human connection is. We all need it, but especially people in recovery.
For sure. And I just want to kind of finish this. We have about a minute and a half left. If everyone could just take 15 or 20 seconds, what's the one takeaway that you want everyone watching this at home to get? Dr. Wanger, we'll start with you.
One takeaway. Well, that's a tough one. I would say look in your medicine cabinet, go home, look in your medicine cabinet, see what's in there. And if you see narcotics, opiates, benzodiazepines, take them to a distribution center and get rid of them tomorrow, please.
Special Agent?
I would say you have to have open and frank conversations in your household. We've talked a lot about stigma here. I absolutely believe, even though I'm a drug agent and have been doing this work for a long time, I definitely believe this is not a disorder that should be stigmatized. So I urge parents to have open, frank conversations with their kids, know what's going on in their kids' lives, and be willing to sit down and have these tough conversations. It's better to have them early than to have folks like me involved later.
Karen?
I guess my biggest thing is it's just for everyone to do something. All for Knox just released a community-wide strategic plan yesterday, and there is something in there for everyone to do. And again, I encourage everyone to go to All for Knox, look at that plan, and see where you can plug in. Because it's going to take all of us to create lasting change in our community. And so if we can all figure out where we can help, I think we can definitely change what's happening right now in our community.
For sure. And Mr. Wahlberg? I believe you're still muted. Oh,
There you go.
There we go. I opened with Mr. Wahlberg was my dad. We need to love each other. We really need to love each other, right? We need to stop judging each other. When we drive down the street and we see somebody struggling on the side of the road, that thought in your mind, push that thought out of your mind and think about that's somebody's child. That's somebody's dad, that's somebody's brother, somebody's sister. And they are not choosing to be there 9 times. I mean, there are people with major mental health issues, but people suffering from substance use disorder are not choosing to be, living outside or struggling the way that we're seeing them struggle. So be kind. Be kind.
Thank you so much. And thank you all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you to all of those watching at home. You can find this on Facebook, on YouTube, and we'll do our best to keep answering those questions via text and on our Facebook comments. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.